One of the biggest issues to me that's going on in the state of Michigan right now is the dismantling of public education. I think public education, this is my personal belief, and I do believe the NAACP believes this too, is the foundation of education, period. And so here to talk a little bit more about what's going on with the public education system here in Detroit is a social justice leader, a man that's very well known, not only on the east side, but also the west side, more so on the east side. And he's been involved as a state rep, as well as other elected positions in and across the city of Detroit. He's been very active and very supportive of improving the quality of life for not only our children, but for Detroiters alike for many years. And that is the great leader, LaMar Lemmons.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. First of all, let me acknowledge my colleague, the Vice President of the School Board, Herman Davis, who's here as well. I also want to give a special shout out to Youth Voice. I happened to participate in their march on Saturday. It was very well attended, very well organized, very well orchestrated into preventing the school to prison pipeline. And that's very apropos, and they had some very interesting statistics showing about suspension and expulsions, increasing the rate of and the direct correlation between the two in terms of those who, one, do not finish their education, and two, end up in the criminal justice system. And so I really want to thank you for, and the youth shall lead them. There's the youth that led us in the civil rights movement. It was the youth that led us in the apartheid movement in Azania or South Africa. And so it is the youth will lead us today. Let me say this, you know, we have the emergency manager, or actually right to this day is the emergency financial manager. And what we have is a grandfathering in of the law for the city of Detroit and for the Detroit Public School District. Now, what's probably most infamous to African Americans is the infamous grandfather clause that they utilized in the right after the Civil War and after, and that essentially said if your grandfather didn't vote, you don't get to vote. You're the status. That was even after so-called emancipation. And so we have a new version, the 21st century version of the grandfather clause, because we, the citizens in the city of Detroit, both the school board and as well as the municipality, have been grandfathered in. And by that, I mean that the 4 options that all the other communities will have, you know, emergency manager is supposed to be an option under the new 436. And there are mediation or to determine, or consent agreement, or bankruptcy, all at the choice of those municipalities and school districts, except they've eliminated that choice for certain cities which are overwhelmingly, disproportionately African American and the minority community. And so today we are in that battle to fight the new Jim Crow, the 21st century version. Whereas half the citizens in the African American citizens in the state of Michigan have been denied their right to vote. You get to vote, but it doesn't count because the individuals are not empowered. And I happen to be one of those disempowered individuals as president of school board. Let me say this, a quick recap on how we got to where we are today. First of all, this is the short version, and later on we'll give you at another occasion. And I've given this at this forum before. They took over the school district in 1999 and returned it almost 7 years later. When they took it over, we had a $93 million surplus. When they returned it, we had $250 million deficit. They gave, in that deficit included a $200 million bond to allow the district to function at an exorbitant interest rate, and they were encumbered by all the contracts that the predecessors had left. So because remember, school boards don't have superpowers to eliminate contracts and renegotiate them. So the district was encumbered. And unfortunately, the school board then was highly erudite, but neophytes. There were 3 lawyers, 3 medical doctors, but they had never been elected. They had never worked so there was no continuity. So you had problems with that. Because they were also, school boards had to go through a lot of training. So they also were, in fact, more training than, as a former legislator, far more training than the legislators had to go through. And probably rightfully so, and they have far less support in terms of staff. And so the school board and all the king horses and all the king's men couldn't put that school district back together again. So they came back, and they came back in 2009 and said, well, you haven't fixed the deficit that they created. You haven't fixed the deficit that they created, the $250 million. So they enter Robert Bob. And after 2 years and 27 months of Robert Bob, the deficit had increased another $100 million.
I'm sorry, what was it when Bob took office? What was the deficit?
The deficit was about $220 million.
And then what's the deficit today?
The deficit today now is about $276 million. But you'll hear the $76 million from Roy Roberts, because what he did is refinance the $200 million. We still owe it. So it's still $276 million, but you'll hear him say there was $327 million when I got here, now it's 76. Really? And okay, and the reason that they were able to knock off about 10 to 30 million is because they liquidated everything in the school district. Everything went on fire sale. They got rid of our bus system, they got rid of all the supplies, the equipment, and they went for pennies on a dollar to contractors, pennies on a dollar. And of course, one of the things they have not been willing to do is fully disclose where the money has. You know, they post something on the internet, which is very general. So when we asked to get into the details so we can see the contracts, we suspect certain radio shows have been getting contracts. We suspect money has been diverted that should have been put into the classroom. We suspect the administration is too large. We can't get any answers. So today, enter Roy Roberts in 2011. His job was to totally dismantle the district, to take away the rest of the pieces. So he created the EAA. Now he came in saying that he was going to put kids in the EAA. And that's like a coach saying at the beginning of the season, we're going to have a losing season. Because the only children that could go into the EAA would be the children that he would fail in his position as emergency manager. Because remember, we're on the Public Act 4 now. And we sent a letter, even though we were disempowered, we sent our opinion anyway, and we said, look, why don't you reconstitute the schools, change school names, but do whatever it takes not to see that any of our children go into the EAA. Problem, he was also the president of the board of the EAA. So that's the definition of a conflict. Because either way, so he could just squeeze the balloon. So he took out Henry Ford, brand new Mumford that you just paid for, took out Denby, took out Pershing, took out Central. I had to take Central because that's the school that Eli Broad is an alumnus of. So, that one had to go. And we had all plans for those institutions. We wanted to make some residential facilities for certain students who need to be taken, who could leave their home and stay there. We had a whole lot of solutions. But before we can implement any of that, they began to dismantle the district. At the same time, remember, he's the emergency manager, so his job is to rectify, that's his primary job, to rectify the financial emergency. So how do you rectify the financial emergency? By jettisoning 12,000 students and the money with it. So it's a perpetuating, self-sustaining situation where he's not going to fix the situation that's going to cause him to lose his position. Now, Roy Roberts is a millionaire, so he doesn't need the money, but he's still, even in his wealth, he's not overseeing $1 billion budget. And with his putting his friends and family and his associates into those places, which is what he's done, which is what Roy Roberts did, Robert Bob did before him. And so when you hear him say all the things that he corrected, those are things that he corrected that were imposed by his emergency manager predecessor. So he'll say, when I got here, we had all these departments, all these contractors. I reduced all that. Yes, he did all that because Robert Bob created all that. That entire overreaching bureaucracy was created by his predecessor, Robert Bob. So now we have a district is accelerating the decline. And now the next step, soon as our district goes under 436 comes into place, we plan to announce some more school closings. And when you close schools, it's always a net loss because the children from the schools that you close don't necessarily come to DPS. In fact, 60% do not return to DPS. But if you have an agenda to make sure those children are going to the charter schools, that's fine by you, because that's where they end up. They either go to charter schools or the suburban school district. In fact, in certain areas of the city, the closest school in their area is a suburban school. Because they've closed so many schools, the closest school to their home is a suburban school. And so we're in the process. Today, we meet today, and our agenda today is to try to force as many contracts to be signed. By the way, on August 8th, once the Public Act 4 was suspended, in theory, we were supposed to have academic control. I can tell you, we never received academic control. And what they do is just keep kicking the can down the road. This morning, I got a call from our superintendent who said he was prohibited from participating in the principal's meeting, a clearly academic function, today. And the law doesn't go into effect until to Thursday, but it doesn't matter to them because, you know, by the time the judge could rule, the new law will already have taken effect. And that's how they've operated. As a matter of fact, Robert Bob, by the way, the board sued, and we won. And then the legislature changed the law with Public Act 4. The board sued, and we found that it was irreparable harm to our children. And there was no outrage. The judge, Wendy Baxter's decision said it was irreparable harm caused by Robert Bob. And nothing happened because they changed the law and they kicked the can down the road. And the same thing with Roy Roberts. We win. You won by getting Public Act 4 suspended initially, and then repealed, and then they kicked the can down the road. And by the time you can get the issue adjudicated, the new law 436 takes place. But we said even if it's for one day, we want our share of the academic control. And so even as we speak today, there's a principal meeting being held by the emergency financial manager. And I realize under Public Act 72, he's only supposed to have authority over financial issues, but that's not how he's operated. And he's taking the same position that his predecessor, Robert Bob, is. Anything a penny touches, he's over. And a penny touches everything, and therefore the academic control doesn't mean anything.